Well, good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be back here at Nalanda again, and the opportunity to say a few words and share the Dhamma with you. The dogmas of most major religious traditions we put to one side for a moment, whether they are ultimately true or false. We don't need to examine that point. But what we can observe is that those dogmas are not verifiable. You are given a choice either to believe or not to believe. That's it. Whereas the teachings of the Buddha are statements about the human condition, and we can divide them into two main groups or categories. Okay, so one group is observation of the way things are. And the second group of teachings based upon the first group consists of statements as to how a wise person should act in light of the truths revealed in the first group of teachings. So the example of this, clear example of this that you'll probably be familiar with is the Buddha's very last teaching, where he states that all things are subject to decay and decline and change. So that's the first kind of teaching, the way things are. And the second teaching, which follows from that, it's a conclusion, it's a recommendation based upon the first kind of teaching, given that all things are impermanent, unstable, unreliable, subject to change, subject to decay and decline. Therefore, you should cultivate heedfulness. You should put effort into being ready for whatever life throws at you. So we can see how that pattern is common throughout the suttas. So these are not philosophical, metaphysical positions that you have to believe in. But these are very simple observations that we all would like to be happy. Nobody wants to suffer. Is that true? Well, it's not a matter of belief, is it? You can look at your experience, look at other people's experience. Does that make sense? And Buddha says that we do better. Our lives are better. They're more happy. They're more, they produce more contentment when we live together in harmony. Living together in harmony is better than living together in disharmony. So that's the kind of statement you start off with. So the Buddha's like grassroots, things that we can agree on, common ground. You know, it's better to live in harmony than disharmony. So, you know, I think everyone could agree with that. So the second kind of teaching is, well, if we all agree that living together in harmony is better than living together in disharmony, then what should we do? What steps should we take to reduce disharmony as much as possible and promote harmony as much as possible? So we have a clear, obvious problem here, and we can state that in another observation. We are all prone to defilement. We're prone to greed, hatred, and delusion. These are the norm. So we want to live together in harmony. We don't want to live together in disharmony. And human defilement is cause of disharmony. Therefore, if we want to live together in harmony, we have to do something about defilement in the mind. Now, in the training and the education that the Buddha is advocating, he points out another truth and something that we can observe, something which is sanditiko. And that is that we have this power of self-discipline, or we have willpower. That is to say, we are not condemned to simply follow our instincts. We have the same instincts as animals, basically. But we have one power or potential which animals, as far as we know, don't have, or have in a very weak degree. And that's the opportunity, the potential to say, no, I won't do that. I really like to do it. I know I'd enjoy it if I did it, but I won't do it. That's quite a remarkable thing, isn't it? And and so where does that come from? How is it possible that we have a strong desire to do something and we don't do it? Well, we have some value in our mind, don't we? We might have it might be, in fact, still in the realm of defilement. We might feel that by doing one thing, acting in one way, we would derive some small pleasure in it, but that would prevent us from doing something else, would give us even more pleasure. So it's sacrificing a weak defilement in favor of a strong defilement. So that can happen. But we can also have noble ideals and say, yeah, I would really like that that object, that see somebody's computer or iPad, you're in a room and there's nobody there, and there's no CCTV cameras and nobody knows you're, and you realize I could take that and nobody would know. And yet most people would not take it. Why? Because, well, it wouldn't be right, or it wouldn't be kind, it wouldn't be fair. So whatever the motivation, we can have a reason, and on the basis of that reason or that value, we can refrain from following our instincts. And the Buddha said this is a resource for the training, the development, the cultivation of a human spirit. But let's look into this a little bit more. We can refrain. We can form an intention to refrain from certain kinds of action and certain kinds of speech. But we can't, through willpower, make a decision to refrain from the emotion or the defilement itself. So we can make a decision and announce it to those around us that I still have anger in my mind. I still lose my temper. I still get irritated. I'm working on that. It takes time. But in the meantime, I will not abuse you physically or verbally under any circumstance. That's quite a remarkable step in human evolution, I would say. But the accompanying observation is that you cannot make a pledge or a promise to the people around you that you won't get angry with them anymore. And here it's very important not to get caught up in that whole should and shouldn't realm. And what I mean by that is if you become a Buddhist and then maybe you think, I should have metta, I should have loving kindness. And then when you get angry, you think, oh, I'm a bad Buddhist. Buddhist says I should have metta. The Buddha says, even if somebody was to be sawing off your limbs, with a two-handed robbers with a two-handed saw and they're chopping off your, cutting off your limbs. If you feel any anger towards them, you're not following the Buddha's teaching. and you think, oh, I'm a bad Buddhist, I can't do that. I think I'd get angry if someone was to try to saw off my arm. But the fault here is that you're assuming that you can just decide as an effort, a will power, not to feel certain things. But the mind, the heart doesn't work like that. And the Buddha is saying, look, observe, see what's really going on, not what you think's going on and what you'd like to go on and what you think you should be like. But observe, it's like this. Yes, I have, when the circumstances conspire, I get angry or I lose my temper, so on. So this is a realistic approach. What I mean by this is you're observing the way the body and mind really function, and you're establishing a training, an education based upon that, rather than upon beliefs and dogmas and ideals and ideas about how you should be, how you shouldn't be. So you observe. So what happens if you make a pledge, a promise to the people around you that you would, under no circumstances, will you abuse them physically or verbally? The first thing that you observe is that people relax, people feel safe, and people start to trust you. So if we come back to our first challenge, how do people with defilements, with greed and selfishness and jealousy and anger, how do people with prone to all these kinds of defilements, is it really realistic? Is it possible to live together in harmony? Because we want to live together in harmony, because living together in harmony is better than living together in disharmony. And if our position is we would all have to love each other and care for each other and forgive each other before we could have harmony, it's never going to happen. But if we are using sila as our tool and the intention to refrain from certain actions as our tool, we can. And it's not easy, but it's possible, it's doable, and it's verifiable that doing it increases the quality of your life. And you feel better about yourself. Your trust in families and in communities. Now we can also observe, if you keep precept consistently, let's say that first precept, it changes your mind. So we're familiar with, say, everything comes from the mind, and how the mind influences and conditions your conduct and your speech. That's certainly true. But there's also an observable fact that when you refrain from certain action, the intention to act in that way arises less and less often and is weaker and weaker. You might compare it to a muscle that's not used. It starts to atrophy. And when that intention to harm and just to vent and to abuse people who upset you or disappoint you or whatever, that intention weakens, and the corresponding wholesome intention arises. And those of you keeping precepts and kept precepts for a long time, you may well have noticed suddenly you just feel this affection for insects and lizards and things that formerly, oh, you don't like them at all. But because you have no intention in your mind of ever killing any of those creatures, you don't feel you have a right to do that anymore. There's a sense of, we're all in this together. We're all fellow sentient beings. And so that idea, we're all fellow beings and companions in birth, old age, sickness, and death. It's a nice idea. But you feel it, you really feel it when you keep the first precept. That sense of being on this, sharing this planet together and not harming each other. And so sometimes, there is, I think many people have this idea, meditations is what it's all about. And like dana and sila are kind of like, fun building blocks, and they're the elementary level, but the really profound Buddhist teachings are just meditation. And the problem here is, I think, one is, what is the Pali word we're translating into meditation? What do we really mean by meditation? And I think often the idea of meditation is a very narrow, it's a reductionist idea. It doesn't really correspond to what the Buddha's talking about. The Buddha used the word bhavana, which means cultivation. And so our overall practice is the abandonment of the unwholesome, the cultivation of the wholesome, the purification of mind. And certainly the application of meditation techniques and developing very strong mindfulness and samadhi and so on, that's the heart of the practice, the most profound. But if you put that idea of what meditation is about, it's something you do in a particular posture, and then you have to try and integrate into your daily life, something like that. And you look at this abandonment of the unwholesome, development of the wholesome, purification of the mind. It gives you a little different kind of focus. And you see, yeah, by refraining from any violence and abuse, physical, verbal, under any circumstances, you're training yourself, and in a way which allows for the flowering of the Brahma Viharas. There's no separation there. They're very intimately connected. And if you may be doing metta bhavana in a formal way while you're sitting with your eyes closed, but in your daily life, you're careless about abusing and hurting or killing other beings. It's like one step forward and two steps back. It doesn't go that deep. So to recap, this is a post. Today's your poster day. So talking about sila and living together, and we're starting off with the most basic kind of idea. Human beings flourish when they live together in harmony. They don't flourish when they live together in disharmony. How can we live together in harmony or reduce the amount of disharmony? Well, we create an environment in which people feel safe. And how do we do that? By using this superpower we have not to follow our instincts under certain circumstances, and particularly the 5 precepts are the bottom line. And the 5 precepts are the 5 basic objects of mindfulness in daily life. In one of the questions that comes up a lot is, how can you be mindful in a conversation? What are you mindful of in a conversation? Because you always have to be mindful of something. So what's your object of mindfulness while you're having a chat? Well, the bottom line, there are various ways of doing this, but before all else, the non-negotiable object of mindfulness is no lies, no lies, no lies. And simply having that, bearing that in mind, it gives you so much perspective and insight into your speech. That just that simple object of mindfulness, because it exposes how often we lie, we find reasons to lie, or we distort, or we exaggerate, or we minimize. All those habits of speech, not mostly the lies. I'm sure mostly what we call white lies, but that compromise with the truth, because we're embarrassed, because we want people to look at us in a certain way, and we're afraid if we speak the truth, maybe they won't like us so much, they won't respect us so much. So in that simple effort to refrain from lying, we illuminate, we expose so many of the more subtle defilements about how we're trying to create an image or sustain an image of ourselves, or how we're speaking in a way because we want something from somebody, or we want to be seen, and we want to be liked, we want to be respected. So much bhavatanha can be exposed simply by keeping that 4th precept. It's an incredibly powerful meditation object. And as I say, particularly in the way that it illumines what's going on in your mind in the midst of a conversation. in a conversation, there's no rule that you have to reply immediately. What I mean is, somebody says something, you can take a breath before, not a long breath and making it kind of showy and like I'm being mindful, but you can just slow things down a bit. And if things are getting really uncomfortable, then you can just take a break. There's no fixed way that you have to have a conversation, but maintaining that ability to speak truth. And if you're not comfortable about talking about something, then say, oh, yeah, I'm not comfortable talking about that. If you want to develop this in further, then there are the 5 principles of Supassita. So the important one here, and this is a real wisdom quality, it's knowing the right time and place for a conversation. So, and then the speech is true, and it's beneficial, and it's kindly, and it's polite. So these are the qualities of good speech. So first, before anything else, is this the right time and place for this conversation? Some conversations need to occur, but maybe not right now, not right here. And some conversations are better in private, a one-on-one. Sometimes then it's better to have a friend or somebody there with you, sometimes better in a more public situation if you're really tired and it's not a time to have an important conversation. So these are how we're mindful, because you have these principles and precepts and agreements. You bear them in mind. That's just what mindfulness is. You bear things in mind. Then they give you like a filter and a way of orienting yourself, or it's a compass for you in your daily life. And so you become more fluent with these things. When you have like 5, it sounds kind of like a lot, but you very quickly become accustomed to them. And then the other, from 5, you get 10. So speech can be right time and place, wrong time and place, true, false, useful, beneficial, not beneficial, polite, kindly, unkind, and polite and impolite. And that gives you a really sharp instrument for analyzing speech in real time, because we need tools sometimes to be mindful. It's like a sort of appreciation of things. This slightly different example, but I don't know if you've ever been to. I'm sure you have, to art galleries. And if you don't know much about art, you never studied art, just walk past the pictures. Oh, that's quite a nice one. Oh, yeah, but it doesn't really. For most people, it doesn't really touch you very much. And then if you're fortunate enough to have someone who explains, why this is a masterpiece, why and the color, what the choice of colors and the perspective and all the different criteria that art people who are experts in the art world can point. And you never. Why did you never see those things before? Because you didn't have the tools, you didn't have the words, you didn't have the concepts, and so it's just a blur. Maybe you have like a good feeling or a bad feeling, but it's kind of superficial. So I found, like, looking at paintings is a good example. There's how huge a gulf there is between looking at a painting with background knowledge and without background knowledge. And so in different areas of our life, how much do we just sort of follow our gut feeling or follow our passion? And in what areas of life do we need some clear criteria and background information and ways of looking at things? And I think in speech, having these kinds of categories, then you're talking to somebody and you can do it really quickly. It's not like you're caught up in some intellectual thing. It's just sort of going off into space when someone's talking to you. But oh, this is true and it's beneficial. But that person speaking, I really feel there's some sort of nasty intention or some unkindness there, or that's really useful. I really need to know that. But the person is speaking in a very coarse, unpleasant way. And you can take those apart. Without that, it all just becomes just one thing, doesn't it? And it's sort of one part of your mind says, yeah, this is good, but I just can't bear, the way that person's talking to me. But you can separate these things. True, useful speech, but they're really not the right time and place. This is the right time and place. What the person is saying is probably true, but it just has not beneficial at all. It's just trivial. So having these kind of tools for being mindful in daily life and in conversations, and having, so like what I'm trying to really put over is how having precepts and agreements, and you can make your own personal sila. So you can, like a private customized sila on the foundations of the 5 precepts. If you have, let's say, you find you've got this kind of habit, and it's kind of annoying how you tend to boast a bit. It's kind of like a bit embarrassing, but I'm going to find yourself boasting. And it's not a beautiful habit, and it's kind of bit crass, and then you make that a precept for yourself. So this is my personal sila. Okay, it's not boasting would not be necessarily breaking the 4th precept, but I'm going to make it. I will refrain from boasting, or I will refrain from gossiping about somebody behind their back, or I will refrain from talking to somebody in a stable relationship. Then you might customize a sila for communicating with people of the opposite sex, not your partner. Do you have making a precept to govern things like chatting online with other people, and so you have a basic principle, like with the 3rd precept, not to act or speak in any way which would be hurtful to your partner, or that your partner would be hurt by if they knew, and not just taking the 3rd precept as referring to adultery, but all the steps from the most innocent, that lead towards that. And any kind of, if you're getting anxious and stressed and you just want to just let off steam with somebody, and you find you're doing that with someone who's not your partner, and you really enjoy chatting and talking to someone who's not your partner. That's not breaking the third precept, but it's within, it's within the scope of that precept, or the kinds of behavior that that precept is meant um, to prevent from disturbing your life and your family life. So precepts are things that you bear in mind, and they illuminate the way that your mind works. And you can take the 5 basic precepts and create a customized sila for yourself, which deals with your own psychology, your own weaknesses, and having a precept, or having something that's I will refrain from this. It just makes it a lot clearer. And if you do lose your mindfulness, then you're aware of it. But as I mentioned just now, this idea of, there's this thing called meditation, and people look at it as like this kind of wish-fulfilling gem, or it's some magic bullet to deal with all your problems, and it's not. And if people are depressed, for example, I don't recommend depressed people from meditating. It's not, oh, it's really depressed. We're Buddhists, help out, take them on a meditation retreat and sort out their depression. It doesn't, I don't think that's very successful at all, because quite often depressed people spend a lot of time thinking about themselves already. Self-obsession is both a cause and a feature. So the Buddhist approach, my Buddhist approach at least, to depression is get out the house. Don't just sit in your room. Get out and go on for a walk, and get some fresh air, and go for a run, go and swim, get some exercise, and basic, and eat well, eat good foods. Don't eat junk foods. It's like, this is the Buddhist approach to depression. Okay, it's not like, oh, this meditation technique will sort you out. It's too narrow and idea of what the Buddha is teaching. And the Buddha's talking of dana. Dana is the wonderful way of dealing with depression and many mental, because if you're offering dana, you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking of, how can I help somebody? How can I do something for someone else? That's therapeutic. Thinking about other people and thinking about what you could do for other people is really good for you. And especially if you are, if you have depressed friends, and um, and taking them to offer some donation, can be at a children's hospital, or any kind of charitable foundation, or something in which you can see for yourself that your actions are having a positive effect on somebody else's life. That, because a lot of people with depression is that this fall into that rut of thinking they're hopeless, they can't do anything, it's going to be like this forever, etc. And how do you counter that? Well, go and make somebody else happy. Go and do something good for somebody else without expectation of reward. Many of you know that Ajahn Sujito, Lumpur Sujito, is in KL at the moment, and he was one of the first monks that I ever got to know when I was first Sangha in England in 1978. We spent a rains retreat together. He was a monk, I was Anagarika. And just before Pansa, Rains Retreat, we went on alms round across Hampstead Heath in London. We went to the house of a lady. She was a retired psychiatrist, and she'd been the chairwoman of the British Psychiatric Association, or whatever, I can't remember the name. So I'd never met a psychiatrist before. I was really fascinated, and she just retired. And I asked her, 50 years of treating people's mental illnesses. What do you think is the most important thing? Is there any one thing you say would help your patients more than anything else? Absolutely, no question about it. 5 precepts, she said. So that's 50 years of working as a psychiatrist, because precepts will give you a sense of self-respect, and you like yourself more when you keep precepts. And keeping precepts is not easy, but being able to maneuver and work your way through life with all its temptations and pressures, and still be able to keep your precepts. There's just such a sense of uplift that comes from that. And so if we're looking at this through this framework of abandoning the unwholesome, developing the wholesome, purifying the mind, this is really an important element, isn't it? If you're sitting with your eyes closed, and what are the kind of things that come up in your mind? So it's worth looking at this, isn't it? Which are the hindrances which tend to come up in your mind most often? Why does your mind leave the meditation object? Why can't you just tell it, "Oh, I'm going to have meditation for half an hour"? No, I just put, set the timer. No more thinking. Okay, no, but you can't do it, can you? But when you start off with the breath or your meditation object, what is it that takes you away from your meditation object? Well, with that moment where your mind leaves the meditation object, what causes that? Most often it's boredom, isn't it? And so we can observe that creating a really positive attitude to the meditation object, and a wholesome desire to be with the meditation object, and to be with yourself in the present moment, that will reduce the likelihood that your mind will wander off. And keeping and offering dana and keeping precepts are supportive factors for this sense of being content to be with yourself in the present moment. Because most people don't want to be with themselves. That's the last thing they want to do, is to be with themselves. So if you're not dealing with that to begin with, then the mind just doesn't want to be in the present moment, doesn't want to be with itself. Dana and sila makes you friends with yourself. But then you look at also what are the kinds of distractions that the mind falls into. And the very fact of being unable to stay with the breath is not a disaster, because the meditation object, we're going against the stream of defilement, against the stream of habit. And you're learning about all the things which are not samadhi. So the classic kind of analogy here is, a statue where you chip away all the things which are not the Buddha or not the horse, and so you maybe not know what samadhi or right samadhi is, but you have to learn and understand and develop skillful means to deal with all the things which are not samadhi or which prevent you from accessing samadhi. And the meditation object will do that. That's part of its function. It's not just like something which will take you to samadhi, but it's the very fact that it going against the grain means that you become aware of what that grain is, exactly what's going on in your mind, because you can't bypass the defilements. You have to see them. So if your idea of samadhi is, I've got to make my mind peaceful and it's so frustrating, I can't do it, my mind's going all over the place, that's a misunderstanding of the process of samadhi. You're learning the skills of looking after your mind so that you won't be drawn into hindrances in the first place. But when hindrances arise, it's not just you've got to get rid of that as quickly as possible and get back to your meditation. There's a lot of information there is pointing to some very important wrong views, desires, aversions, and so you can learn from a difficult meditation, sometimes more than from so-called good meditation. But one of the things that is clear, I think, is how much agitation in the mind and remorse and shame and guilt, all these things, is based upon actions and speech, things we've said and done or didn't do or didn't say. So by keeping precepts, you are reducing the amount of clutter and rubbish, garbage and your junk in your mind that you have to deal with. So that's part of the purification process. It's not just letting go of stuff, it's reducing the amount of stuff that you need to let go of. And this is what dana and sila helps you with. See? And then it works the other way. Well, okay, I've said we have this power, the willpower and the willing ability to refrain from things. But if we're not developing mindfulness systematically and consistently, we forget, don't we? I'm not going to hurt or harm, I'm not going to steal. And then next thing you know, you've done it. What happened? I said, you lost your mindfulness. So precepts are helping you to be mindful. They're objects of mindfulness. But they are without that systematic training in the formal meditation, that you can't sustain that general awareness well enough to be able to refrain that way. You need mindfulness and you need patience, loving kindness. And so with all kinds of anger and aggression and so on, if you are consistently cultivating loving kindness, then the likelihood that angry, aggressive thoughts are going to affect your behavior is less. So everything's related in that way. And thinking is not your enemy. Thinking can be, one of the most powerful tools in meditation. You have all this kind of discursive, conceptual meditations, where it's the such as the Asubha contemplations, death meditation, and this whole realm of Yoniso Manasikara. So Yoniso Manasikara, kind of difficult word to translate, and translated in different ways by different people, skillful reflection, consideration, and so on. But the point I'd like to make this evening is most of those translations tend to focus like on the content of thought and changing the content or producing certain kind of content of thought. But another aspect of Yoniso Manasikara is the framework of thought. So we're always thinking within a framework, and one of the most overused idioms, and it's like thinking outside the box. Yeah, think outside the box. That's being created. It's not possible. You can't think outside a box. When you think outside the box, they mean think in another box, not the box. You can't think outside of boxes. You're always, so the thing you need to be mindful, what is the box that you're thinking within? And so like a illustration of this is somebody who, there's boxes, I'm hopeless, I'm terrible, I can't do anything, I'll make anything of myself, and so on. So that's a box, okay? That's a yoniso manasikara box, it's an unwise box. So you have some failure and some disappointment, and you see that within that box. Oh, here we go again, same old story. I thought it was going to be better this time, and it's not. And so the box conditions the content to a great degree. And let's say you have a different box, and your box is, I'm a learner. I learn from experience. I'm not afraid of failure. I grow through failure. So you have these kinds of, this is your box, your sense of who you are in a conventional sense. And you have the same kind of disappointment or failure as the other person. And yeah, okay, failure, start again, get back up again, get back on the horse. All these kind of cliches, but they're good cliches. And you've got a good box for thinking. So you can't have a box. I mean, this is something we can observe about thinking. When you have a box, you think inside a box. It may not be the usual box. And we think in terms of stories. We understand everything as narratives of stories. And what's your narrative? What's your story? We can only make sense of things as stories. And observing that and creating good and nourishing stories for yourself. So there's a role for thinking and wise reflection accompanied by an awareness of the framework within which you are thinking. And that can consist in the sila and the samadhi. And with the meditation, the formal meditation, then don't make it into a personal project, and don't let those gaining ideas take over your mind. Don't develop this syndrome. I was talking about this syndrome, meditator syndrome, is how can I experience that same thing I did on my first meditation retreat syndrome? It's like so many people, that everything sort of comes together nicely when you first meditate and you think, wow, and then the next time, how can I get that back again? And in the evening you can't, the next day you can't. And some people it's like 5 years, 10 years. oh, I had this wonderful experience on my first meditation retreat, and I just never had that ever again. And how do I think I'll ever, it's like it's hungry ghost mentality, it's not the point. Peak experiences are not the point of meditation. It's the understanding of all experience. And so a peak experience or a trough experience is just stuff, and it's just experience. And all experience is impermanent, is dukkha, anatta. And a peak experience is every much um, uh, a within the three characteristics of it as a trough experience, the best and the worst. So having this strong, powerful meditation experiences, uplifting, it's energizing, but don't think that that's what you should be experiencing, and you're doing something wrong if you're not. So much has to come together, and your effort is just one of those. Your technique is just one of those conditions. So just humbly apply yourself. And I was just counseling someone earlier today. If you find you're sort of losing your enthusiasm and getting a little bit discouraged, then just check whether it's not because it's becoming this kind of, you've got this goal, it's your project, and you're not getting where you thought you would be or you should be. And I said, I'll do a nine-minute meditation, for example, and just say, I'm going to meditate for 3 minutes and offer all the merit of that meditation to my mum. And then I'll do 3 minutes for my dad, and then I'll do 3 minutes for my teacher. And then it's incredible kind of energy that can come, because it's not, and then that's a real a reminder, oh, why don't I usually feel this energy? Because it's for me, and once it's for me, then it's ups and downs and enthusiasms and disappointments. But once you feel you're doing it for someone you love or someone that you're indebted to, then you can access that energy. So there's a new box for your meditation. So if you're feeling you're losing your enthusiasm, this sort of how am I looking at this? What's the framework that I'm approaching this? Because it's not a wise framework. So I could go on, and in in Wat Nanachat in the old days, I didn't used to use a clock. I had this internal clock. I knew how to give a talk for 30 minutes. And I'd stop and look at the clock, exactly 30 minutes. And at nighttime, this is like on a Uposta day, 30 minutes in the morning. At nighttime would be 90 minutes. And I could do it just like that, 90 minutes. And it's not arbitrary meaning, because in those days, the recordings were made on cassette tapes, and you had two kinds of, you had C60s, the old people remember the C90s, and we didn't have so many of these. So I wanted to be very economic. So if I gave a 30-minute talk in the morning, that would be two posters, and you had one C60 tape. And then the nighttime talk would be a C90 tape. So that was how my talks were structured. Don't do that now. And so I've been talking for more than an hour, but we've left the C60, C90 age, and I think the digital resources will cope with a slightly overlong talk, which I would like to bring us to an end at this point.